Welcome to everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Matt Weldy. I'm fortunate to serve as executive director of the Monogram Club. Appreciate you joining this afternoon's chat featuring the McFarland family head men's soccer coach Chad Riley and our Doug and Lisa Jones family head women's soccer coach Nate Norman. I think, guys, if I'm not mistaken, it's been about a year since we've done one of these virtual chats, and it's been a unique way to connect our alums to supporters of the Rockney Athletics Fund and all members of the Notre Dame soccer family. Uh, Chad and Nate, it's always fun to do these together and combined, given your guys' background relationship and relationship as former teammates. So before we begin, just a quick thanks, as always, and for all you do for Notre Dame men's and women's soccer. We do these chats exclusively for Monogram Club members, for Rockney Athletics Fund members, other supporters, as I mentioned, and just kind of a peek behind the curtain and kind of a temperature check of what's going on campus, and as both programs are working through their spring seasons and as we get closer to the fall. So, especially with this audience, these two need no real introduction, but Chad Riley is a 2004 Notre Dame grad, earned 4 monograms with the Fighting Irish men's soccer team. Nate Norman, a 2007 grad, also a four-time monogram winner with the men's soccer program. Both coaches entering their 8th seasons at the helm of their respective programs. And Chad leading the Fighting Irish to 2 College Cup appearances. The Notre Dame men's team posted a 7-5-5 record last fall. On the women's side, Nate and the Fighting Irish women posted a 14-4-4 record, advancing to the quarterfinals of the NCAA tournament. It was Notre Dame's 5th NCAA tournament appearance under Coach Nate Norman. So with that, I will kick it over to our guest of honor here this afternoon for just some quick opening remarks, and then thank you all for pre-submitting questions. We're going to make sure we sift through all those, and then we should have time at the end if you wanted to unmute and ask some additional questions. So with that, I will kick it over to you, Chad, to kick us off for some opening remarks.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for everybody for joining. I think it's always better to get real questions that maybe want to get answered. Because like for Nate and I, just living in it every day, and especially now with the college sports landscape shifting every day under our feet, we can at least give you an update on what's most current. But yeah, thanks, again in advance for all your support for the program because it's what makes this job even more fun. But yeah, kind of where the team is now, we've had a good sort of, it's hard to say spring too much here yet, although it is officially spring. We've had a couple spring-like days, but we've had a good second semester so far. I think we had a pretty hungry and disappointed team after the fall. I think we had a good team that was close to being very good. If we kind of handled each box a little bit better, I think we would have played a little longer than we did. But that happens in our sport sometimes, and I think it's all about the response now. And I think the team's had a great response this winter and spring. We've had a lot of great training sessions. We've had 2 games so far, so we've got 3 more game weekends. But we've played Wisconsin in an indoor field in Rockford and ended up winning that game 1-0. Played well. And then right before spring break, we played DePaul in the IAC at Notre Dame, where we train, and won that game 1-0 as well. And I think showed some good improvement. And I think this is always a fun time of the year where your team's sort of always turning over in college sports, but we lost some big characters this past year, so it's been fun to see the space created and to see some of the younger players kind of growing into that space and the roles within the team, and they're doing a great job. I think they're excited now after spring break. We're training outside, so they're excited to be on the grass and playing more outside, and we're looking forward to finishing off the semester strongly and to seeing our growth kind of culminate in these next 3 games that we have to finish out the spring. But I'm excited about the group. It's a fun group of guys. They love Notre Dame, love soccer, are excited to compete. And I think they're primed for a really good response as we head into the fall season for 2025.
Yeah, no, I would echo a lot of those comments, like just from just the fact that we appreciate all you guys, all the support. I think a lot of, we're different programs, Chad and I, but we do a lot of stuff, not only together personally, but our teams are closely connected. So I know a lot of, the support, even if somebody individually gives stuff to the men or the women, like, we all benefit and bring joy from it. So thank you guys just, on the men's and women's side for everything you do to help us really, really serve our student athletes the best way that we can. Our program right now, like I have a group. Well, like la last year we had a group that was really, really young. We started like six freshmen, and like two sophomores most of the season. So we were a very young group. We were kind of clunky early in the season, but as the season wore on, it was very rewarding. Like they seemed to figure things out and really grew and got better. And I'm gonna be honest with you, by the end, we ended up being a 4 seed in the inside tournament. But by the end, I kind of felt like we were as good as anyone, and I feel like we had a really good chance to make a nice run. Even we got to that quarterfinal game. We played Stanford, who was a team we had beaten 3-0 about a month earlier. I thought it was a good matchup. And credit to Stanford, they did a lot of kind of different things in the game. They played a little more direct, a little bit more physical, and took us out of our rhythm. And they beat us, which kind of ended I think the season a little bit earlier than we kind of thought and hoped. So kind of left us with a pretty good drive and edge to us that hopefully we're bringing into the spring. But we have a chance to be, I'll be, we have a chance to be really, really good next year. Like I have a very, very talented group that if we can, one, keep them all here because we do have a lot of talented kids that, I think we probably about 8 or 9 kids that could probably go pro at any time that they want. And, trying to make sure that, they still see the value in their development, not only from an athletic standpoint, but from an academic standpoint as well. And, but really help them kind of see what we can do for them as people. And I think more than likely we will keep all of our players, but this kind of new landscape, you just never know. The NWSL is becoming more aggressive in trying to pull, whether it's high school kids or college kids, from young ages. And I have my own kind of personal thoughts and opinions on that. But like I said, we have a chance to be really good. We played our first spring game actually yesterday. We beat Michigan State 4-2, who was a team one of the 4 teams we lost to last year. So it was kind of a good game for us to maybe, measure ourselves against a team that was really a top, probably 10, 12 team in the country, a team that was in the round of 16 in the NCAA tournament last year. And, I think they return a lot of players and should have a good team next year. So it was a good start. But we're excited about next season and seeing where we can, what we can do next season for sure.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Thank you for the intro and kind of teeing it up. And you really started to get into some of the questions, and most of these came through and directed at both of you, Chad and Nate, and perspective from both programs. But Nate, I'll just kind of stay in your space here. You mentioned the quarterfinal matchup with Stanford. One of the questions for both of you, but we'll start with Nate, is what are your biggest takeaways from last season?
Yeah, like I said, we have a very technical, talented, athletic, gifted team. I think some of the games that we struggled in, and this is something we're trying to help our group, is just teams that decided to sort of kind of muck up the game, if you will. Like, I don't know if it's the right terminology I should use, but like just really make it a physical battle and try to break us up out of rhythms. And I think one of the things that, we're obviously still trying to get better at the things that we think we're great at, but we want to become a stronger, more powerful team that can win different types of games. So if a team wants to be direct and honestly foul us a bunch at midfield and stuff like that, we need to be better at set pieces. We need to be better, defending set pieces. We need to just be kind of a grittier, hungrier team that we can win a nice, pretty open game, but we can also win a game where somebody, maybe sits in and tries to counter us or makes it just a physical battle. And that's something that we're really trying to impress upon them. And I thought yesterday was a great first step because if I'm being honest, like Michigan State was a perfect example of a team last year that physically beat us up. And yesterday, if I'm really judging it honestly, like I would say we probably matched them physically. We didn't necessarily overwhelm them physically, but then just matching them kind of 50-50 allowed a lot of our talented players, I think, to sort of take over the game for us. but that's something that we've talked a lot about is just, we want to be a team that presses hard and is really good in any transition moment, whether it's transitioning forward or backwards, is really good at doubling down. Like, we want to be a team that is willing to do more than any other team in the country to win a soccer game, not just be more talented than that team.
That's great. Thanks, Nate. And Chad, you talked about a hungry group coming off of the slate last fall, but same question for you. Biggest takeaways coming away from last season.
Yeah, I think you're you're always taking a lot away, but some of the biggest things I think that we took away were some growth areas. So we, probably for the first time since I've been here, I think in, most of our games, with the exception of, I think it was either one or two, we outpossessed the other team. So I think that was good. We controlled the game with the ball. But I think with that, it sort of highlighted the importance of always having that balance a little bit like Nate was talking about. But for us, it was a little bit, I liken it to whenever you're playing basketball and you don't have a big center, so it's like we needed a forward that sort of stretched the game, a big target, and we had some injuries, and so we never could quite find that person to sort of be our quote, sort of center for our team that really stretched the other team. So I think it's been a good example for our group of, what are some of the positives that we did well, and then how do we grow on those? And I think some of it's just growth. We had a freshman goalie as well that's going to be outstanding, but so that's one end of the box. But what we've been working on a lot on this winter and spring is how do we turn our sort of possession into more chances? And so, excuse me, how do we find that balance between connecting a pass and then maybe playing a penetrating pass where we can get a chance? So, excuse me, it's cold season here.
Should be spring. It's not yet.
Yeah,
It'll come
exactly.
soon, right? Hey, Chad, we'll stay with you then. And you talked about the spring season that you're working through now and what's left of it, and as you're evaluating talent and kind of getting everybody on the right seats on the bus. But what are you and your staff, what are your main priorities as you work through the spring season?
Yeah, I think the big thing is you take those things that, you sort of evaluate throughout the the fall, and then how do you grow a little bit each day towards that? Because I think, your group's always sort of hovering between being young and old, but even then it doesn't necessarily always line up with what year they are in school. But I feel where our team right now is like we're trying to teach them what are the really important moments in a game, and a lot of those are, in transition, but also kind of right around your boxes. And so we've been trying to build that kind of in each day, if it's an attacking day or a defending day or a transition day, are we helping sort of grow the group and recognizing like what are the really important moments that, because soccer, we have only really one stat that matters, and that's the score. How do we get them to understand these moments that lead up to goals a little bit better, and just kind of growing the overall maturity of our team, I think. And nothing, not their fault, it's not that they're immature due to their own fault. It's just where we are when your team turns over a little bit. Can we help them grow up and understand these sort of key and vital moments in the game a little bit better? And then also, I think in a young person, you're always trying to build the resilience. So a lot of those first year guys that got good games, can we start continue to build their mental kind of resilience? Because it's a different answer at Notre Dame. You got to work hard in school, you got to work hard on the field, and now with someone asked about the addition of these other schools, we have to travel a lot right now to be great. So to do all those things, you kind of have to have this daily sort of goal of, are you becoming a little bit more resilient and tough mentally each day?
Sure. Absolutely. It's in different challenges at Notre Dame for sure as it relates to all those things that you mentioned. Nate, similar question on your end, just main priorities for you and your staff throughout the spring season.
Yeah, I think I kind of mentioned we have some really talented, especially attacking players. And I think when we reviewed the season and really analyzed it, we got a lot of like individualized goals where we have players on our team that have stats like 19 goals and one assist, 8 goals and one assist, 11 goals and two assists. And we do a lot individually within our team. I don't ever want to stop them from having the freedom to take players on and beat people. And if I'm being honest, I'd be a hypocrite if I ever told someone to stop dribbling, because that's all I really liked to do when I was a player. But at the same time, I think they can be way more effective just, if we can have a little bit of danger of like sometimes combining with each other and looking for each other and using each other. And that's something we've talked a lot about is just can we be a little more creative in the final third besides just being some individual members that really go at people. I think the other thing is, I mentioned this a little bit in my first talk, but just being able to adapt in different games. The reality is a lot of teams will do one thing for 3 or 4 straight weeks. And when they play us, they play a complete different style, whether it's a different formation, whether their line of confrontation is different place. And, we had a lot of young players that sometimes when we didn't maybe present them the correct scouting report because somebody would change, like it took us a while to get into the game. And now like we have this team that's a lot of returners. We're basically returning like 10 starters from our team last year. We have large numbers that we can present them different challenges in practice and really through our spring games that we can adapt, whether a team changes formation, whether they press us, whether they sit in and helping them really adapt to different types of challenges that teams present, even if it's unexpected. But I think that's a big piece. And then the last piece, like I said, is just can we be just a kind of a tougher, more powerful team that not only wins the technical, maybe some athletic and possession battle, but can we be a little bit more ruthless and win the kind of physical, grittier parts of the game as well?
I love it. I love it. Thanks, Nate. And you good segue. And maybe it's some of the experience returning, like you just said. But what excites you or concern? What excites or concerns you the most about the upcoming fall season?
I think exciting is like I said, we got a lot of returners, we got a lot of talented players. Um, I think concerns is like I love that then they all collectively have really high expectations for themselves and but I want them not to maybe carry on a lot of pressure on themselves. I think that's something that we need to do a good job as a staff. And I think the other piece is like making sure we continue to have a selfless team because we'll have a lot of players who get different types of accolades or get called into like national teams and having a team that really can genuinely be happy for each other and not necessarily always be the one that gets the accolades. And I'm not saying we for the most part, we've been really successful at that. But kind of when you go into a season, when you have sort of all these players that have really high expectations for themselves and have great individual goals, it's getting them to buy into like, hey, when the team is doing great, even though you may not be getting, whatever the ACC Player of the Week award or this and that, like you're still benefiting from it. And also, can you be a genuinely good teammate? And I think that's something that we need to make sure that we are we we're focusing on just from a culture piece of our team because that'll allow us, I think, to be our best next season.
Sure. Thank you for that. Thank you for the peek behind the curtain there. And then Chad, coming back to you, same thing as excitement and or concerns as you get ready for the fall.
Yeah, I think mainly just excited. I think, that's the fun part about college sports and kind of at Notre Dame is, every year you hopefully you're losing good players and good guys and good leaders. And then it never gets old to see young people grow, and I think that's been the fun part of this spring, these first couple games, whether it's guys graduating or injuries for older people, there's been these opportunities for some of the younger guys to get a bigger role in these games and they've really taken it. And so now I think the fall is just sort of like that culmination of all the hard work and kind of growing that the guys do from January until August. And so it's always just exciting to see can they really turn it into something special. So I think that's what I'm always most excited about is to see, someone that's a little bit younger that hasn't got it, but they have that belief in themselves, and you hopefully help stoke that belief a little bit, and then they get to go do it under the lights at Alumni Stadium. So I think I'm just excited to see the young guys some of the new guys get a chance to go out there and make their mark on the program.
Can,
Yep. And hey,
can
Chad,
I ask,
oh, go ahead.
can I just ask a quick question to the panel real quick? Do I have Sammy Schofield on this as Razorback Soccer? She's the assistant at Arkansas. Sammy, you on
I
there?
was
Are you,
looking
are you,
at
are you
that
listening to this?
Razorback.
I
She's
don't, they're not even unmuting this thing, which is totally fine. I just think I was looking through the people on this. I see Razorback Soccer. I'm like, who would be Razorback Soccer? I was like, Sammy would definitely get
Yeah.
would have gotten this link. So yeah. Thanks for coming on, Sammy.
Be careful now, guys. It's being recorded too. Uh, Hey Chad, you talked about some of the newcomers. This one came in from this question from a men's soccer alum, but thinking about the next man in and some of the younger guys, what contributing players last fall have departed that you're going to need to kind of fill those voids?
Yeah, we had a great group of guys who, were lucky to go to, I think the first group to go to two college cups, but Matthew Rue graduated. He got ACC Attacking Player of the Year. Kyle Gittenbacher, Josh Ramsey, and Bryce Bonneau. They're all the ones that contributed quite a bit that finished their last season last year.
Awesome. We're excited to see the next man up concept and who's able to kind of fill those spots and keep us on track moving forward. And Nate, this one was for you. It's what is it like to play in a conference where all four participants in the College Cup were from the ACC? Does that make recruiting easier or harder? There's a congratulatory note on a great year last year, but just talk about that of the ACC slate and obviously one of the best and probably the best, but does that make recruiting harder, easier? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would, from a recruiting standpoint. I guess I'm not really sure. That's a good question. I think it's a great conference to play in because you get to play against such great teams. And I guess in some ways, you might recruit a player and they're like, hey, I really want to go to some school in the ACC because you guys have these awesome teams. In some ways, I'll be honest, like I think there's this shadow that always is hanging over the ACC. Like, is it going to just implode because there's schools that are always trying to get out of it because they want to make more money in other conferences. And I don't know if I'm supposed to say that or I'm allowed to say that, but it is the reality of it. So I think from a competitive standpoint, it's fantastic. And that's a great thing. I think, I guess it, probably does help somewhat organically from recruiting. But if I'm being honest, I don't sit there and say like, hey, you got to come play in the ACC. Like I think Notre Dame's a place that, regardless if we're Big East, ACC, if we're playing in some other conference, like, I think kids come for very specific reasons, and we try to recruit for that whole total student athlete experience that Notre Dame offers.
Mhm, mhm. Great. And then Chad, same for you. And how have the additions of SMU, Cal, Stanford, how's that impacted your team in positive ways or otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's three really good soccer teams. I think obviously the biggest impact when you play them at their place is travel. But I think the part that's like, the biggest negative to me is it just means you don't really have a true like league anymore in the regular season because you're playing about half the teams in your conference. And so it makes scheduling really tricky because in men's soccer, it's 15 teams because not everyone sponsors it. So it's hard to play two divisions. So we sort of have this 4-year cycle of rotating teams, and so really instead of a league, it's sort of more of a scheduling partnership that you have, which is great because you get some great games, but it's sad that a little bit of the sort of ACC identity of the regular season to me is a little bit gone. We try to make up for it by having a big tournament, but even that, a soccer tournament that spreads to both coasts again is just a little bit unique. But I think it's three good teams for sure, and the ACC on the men's side is always the best conference, similar to the women. But yeah, I think the biggest negative for me is it's taken a little bit away of the sort of identity of playing in a league because seven of the teams every year now we don't see during the regular season.
Hmm. Hmm. Sure. Sure. Thanks for that. And now with the house settlement, I think it's a moving target every day. But one of the next question here is around roster limits. And apparently we're going to know some more around April 7th, right? Not holding our breath on that. We'll see what comes
Yeah.
of that. But Nate, I'll kick this one over to you. This came in from a women's soccer alum, but how will new roster limits affect your team this fall?
Yeah, yeah, unfortunately, yeah. I mean, if it all does actually go through and that part of it, goes through, like, um, they're, right now I think we maybe be two over, and that's something that, we've had internal conversations about with like the players and stuff like that. And, understanding there's this possibility and and then how to handle that. But if I'm being honest, I think it's like I think it's kind of crazy on a couple levels. Like one, I think from a just logistics standpoint, if it seems odd to create like a national rule about roster limits. Like I almost feel like it's a cop out from like athletic administrations. So like for example, if I don't mind saying that because I think someone like Pete is outspoken that he doesn't agree with them. But if there's programs out there that want to tell their women's soccer programs to hold 28 players, then go ahead and do it. Like and then enforce that. And tell them they can only hold that amount of players because of for whatever reason, whether it's budgetary or this and that. But if there's programs that want to hold 34 or 35, then let them do it. I think it's like I don't think a lot of these administrators want to tell a coach they have to do it, so they want to make a national rule, to do that to reduce the amount of athletes at their school. So I think from just a I don't know, I just find it, like these I don't know, I just see the whole concept of it isn't right. And then I think the fact that they potentially would have no lead in, like so they don't allow us to have like some sort of runway, a 1 or 2 year runway to get to that point where we're not having to like literally cut players that are already at schools that are wonderful members of the team that, come out and, selflessly serve their teammates. And you have to turn around and say, hey, look, like we just don't have a spot for anymore. I'm sorry, I can't do anything. Like I just find that really the antithesis of everything that at least I've thought that like the NCAA and college athletics was all about. But it seems like there's a decent possibility that that could actually happen.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, you touched on Pete's approach. I've appreciated for him for so many reasons, but one is just that outspoken, and I think he's called that criminal, is to tell a kid if that we've recruited is, after April 7th and kind of what we learn of like, hey, this has changed and it's not our decision, but what I appreciate too is him kind of doubling down on the resources that will, as Notre Dame, we provide to our kids, if that is a pull the Band-Aid off approach and that goes into effect for the fall. I guess we'll know more hopefully here in the next week or so. Kind of in that same space, Chad, over to you. Will roster limits will walk-ons be reduced? And talk about any changes as it relates to scholarships in this new landscape.
Yeah, I think that's for, we're sort of lucky right now that would be sort of at or under it going into the fall. But I do think at Notre Dame, one of the biggest sort of negatives will be the sort of limited ability for walk-ons to because that was when you at Notre Dame if in soccer and men's soccer we sometimes carry 30 or 31 four of those spots, three or four of those spots would be sort of walk-on spots, which is a big part of our program for as long as I've been involved. And we actually have a young guy training with us right now who's just an amazing guy, but it's sort of this tension of with limited spots, in the transfer portal. What do you do with the walk-ons? Because you love that part of your culture of just someone that really does elevate the experience of your whole team every day. I mean, there's just so many special kids at Notre Dame that it'll be sad if we can't figure out a way to sort of keep that one or two walk-ons on our team. So yeah, that's the biggest negative part that we're trying to figure out. And then for us, I think Notre Dame's in a unique situation, just in a lot of gender equity type situation with scholarships. So right now, unfortunately, we won't have any new scholarships. Most of the additional ones will be a handful to football, and then some of the women's sports will get more scholarships. But right now, we'll continue to be at 9.9 scholarships.
Great. Great. Thanks for that, Chad. And wouldn't be a peek behind the curtain if we didn't get into the NIL space. And I think we started to touch on it a little bit earlier, but for both of you and Nate, we'll start with you. But just any impact of NIL within your program and specifically in the recruiting and retention and what the university or athletics is doing to support your program in this environment.
Um, yeah, I mean, I would say from a general standpoint, like NIL is definitely in women's soccer. I think with some of these sort of upper echelon, like top recruits. Like not saying all of them, but some of them are, you get in recruiting conversations, and the reality is they might say like, this school's offering me $30,000 a year, or this and that. And I think for us, like we are still in a bit of a unique situation that, I still believe like, hey, if you want to fall $40,000 a year somewhere, and you want to go to this school, like that's fine. Like we're not going to match something like that. But in Notre Dame, like you stay here and you get a Notre Dame degree, it'll blow that, $30,000 a year out of the water over the course of your lifespan. So if that's what you're making decisions on, then like, we're probably not the place for you. And a lot of times that's the message. At the same time, like we want to provide opportunities for our players to be able to, make extra money, through, I think, that those NIL means of, if they want to go out and do stuff and work at it, and we want to have those that ability to help them as well. So I think for us, it's like it's finding some sort of balance of helping kids that do want to enter into that space and having the resources to do it, and honestly kind of just showing them that, hey, the school is really supporting women's soccer. Because I think unfortunately some of these kids will view the school as like, do you support your you know women's soccer program through NIL or not, through like the overall support, like if they actually really care or not. So I think that's, what we're kind of navigating as we enter into this like really new landscape starting next year, once, all this revenue share starts. And now that they're still continuing to be NIL in certain areas. And to be honest, I think we're still trying to figure all that out. Like that stuff, there's so many variables there that are trying to settle in. I don't know if you have any more clarity, Chad, but that's probably, I feel like I've rambled on about this, but that's kind of where I'm at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's impacting every sport. I think men's soccer, where sort of supply and demand, like I don't think people are getting money on top of a scholarship. I think programs maybe the last couple of years that have had access to, and I think it's hard because we talk about true NIL and then like the collective, that maybe we're giving out some what used to be called funny money. But I think in men's soccer, it's mainly kind of increasing your scholarship pool. So I think that's something that, however it shakes out, like Nate said, we're still sort of building the airplane as we're flying, and that's what we'll try to do, is have it concentrated on if there's any additional funds, to help more guys pay for school than necessarily to give someone on top of a full scholarship more money. But then I think it's created just a lot of kind of ordinary, everyday opportunities for guys on small levels, whether it's camps, whether it's, something Jack, our old AD, used to talk about: name, image, likeness, and ideas. I think someone, at least in our that gets my emails, it's been pretty cool that you'll know Daniel Boateng, who's a rising senior, and through his undergraduate program in the Keough School of Global Affairs, created this pretty impactful and amazing nonprofit where he goes to Ghana. But keep an eye out. He's going to have a "What Would You Fight For" commercial coming up this next fall. But he's also gotten a cool opportunity through Bank of America to get some help and some notoriety for his nonprofit. So I think it's been cool that that's a much easier process than it was back when Nate and I were playing, where basically the blanket answer was always no. But if you're a regular student, you could. So there's been some positives there. I think I think it's still getting itself into the general knowledge of the guys on the team. But I think the hard part at Notre Dame is there's not much time to do anything extra other than your sport, your school, and eating and sleeping. And so, where I think they're very kind of entrepreneurial, I think they're pretty much maxed out on soccer, school, and then kind of their life at Notre Dame, which we hope they embrace. But yeah, I think it's coming. We're hoping to make it, however it sort of solidifies itself. How do we create more opportunities, more scholarship dollars for our team, so more guys, yeah, don't have to graduate with loans.
Mhm. Mhm. Thank you guys for that. Like I said, it wouldn't be an update if we didn't talk a little bit about NIL, and I bet when we talk about this on the next one, there'll be some new wrinkles involved. So
Yep.
the target will keep moving. I remember this. I think we touched a little bit last time we had the group on Zoom. Nate, I remember, or Chad, I remember some of your comments, and I'll start with you on this one. But are D1 coaches still fond of multi-sport athletes? How do you approach that? And if so, how do you recommend an athlete pursues playing multi-sports while being competitive and recruitable in soccer if that's their primary? And just a third one, I guess, how many of your current players were multi-sport athletes in high school?
Yeah, no, I do. I love multi-sport athletes. I think it, you know, you'd have to just sort of maybe even see if there's been any studies to know what it's like on the large scale. But I do know a lot of our guys, were playing at least another sport through middle school. I don't, it becomes a little bit tricky in high school depending on your high school and the town that you live in to play you sort of multiple sports once you get into high school. But I'm for it. I think most of the studies show you can play more sports if you play different sports versus if you just play the same sport all the time. You can end up with some overuse and chronic injuries. And then I do think, there's certain sports that are complementary. I always use the example of basketball and soccer. I think a lot of the decisions that you make in soccer and in basketball can be similar both with the ball and without the ball. But I also think it gives, each side of your body a little bit of relief. If you're playing basketball, it's not the same as repetitively kicking a soccer ball, and kind of vice versa. If you're jumping all the time on a court, you get a little bit of a break when you're playing on the grass outside. So yeah, I think it's always going to be individualized, to each athlete. And but I think it always is, what is your goal? And then I think depending on what your goal is for college, after college, I think that can help you answer some of the questions on how long do I play multiple sports. Because if you're having the time of your life playing multiple sports, then please do that. But if you get to a point where you're like, oh, I'd like to focus and see how great I can be at this one sport, then I think, in that kind of middle school, early high school time might be the time to start thinking about specializing. But I always want to preach that sports are they're meant to challenge yourself. They're meant to be enjoyable. And, I think you got to make sure you never lose sight of that.
Mhm. Love that. And Nate, on your end, any perspective or anything you look at as it relates to multi-sport athletes in your recruiting and anything you wanted to add?
I don't I think I agree with a lot of what Chad said. I don't know if there's anything I really even disagree with. I would just maybe add that um I agree. I maybe echo I think I played basketball up until about ninth grade, and then I thought it was a good balance for me with soccer, and then I really focused on soccer. And soccer was always my primary sport, if you will, but I thought it was good, even mentally, like to have a sport that I don't know. I kind of put a lot of my emotional energy into soccer, and honestly, I'd go play basketball games, and would I be disappointed if I lost? Like, sure, but it wasn't like I was thinking about the game when I was going to sleep that night, and that would always happen with soccer. So I think even from like a mental standpoint, it was actually nice to play a sport where I was maybe wasn't putting quite as much pressure on myself because I wasn't actually sacrificing as much for that sport. But once I got to be, maybe like 14, 15 years old in there, like I think it became pretty clear I needed to, devote as much time as I could if I wanted to be the highest level player I could. Now, having said that, I think there are unique people out there that have the athletic skill set where they maybe can play at a high level up until, even throughout high school, and it doesn't necessarily hurt them with like maybe the one sport they want to go into. But I mean, I feel like I'd be misleading if I didn't say probably 90, 95% of the people out there. I think it's good when you're young to be multi-sport. I think once you get into sort of that late middle school or early high school, if you really want to play a high level, unless you're just this world-class athlete, I would maybe start transitioning into really focusing on that single sport.
Great. No, I appreciate you guys' perspectives in the multi-sport athlete space. Nate, I'll stay with you, and we have three or four more of these to get through, and then we want to leave a few minutes at the end if there are open questions. But Nate, what does a typical D1 soccer player's training schedule look like in season versus off season? Hours allowed, and kind of how we stay compliant and time management, and then how do you determine how those hours are divided between strength and conditioning versus on the field? If you can chat just a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think every program would be slightly different. And if you asked like a handful of different programs around the country, especially what they do in the spring season, fall. a lot of it's centered around games. So we either play games, if we have a 2 game week, it's Thursday, Sunday. If it's a 1 game week, it's either going to be on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday typically. And you know, there's always one day completely off a week, and it's not like one of those where it's like a wink, wink, like you still need to go out and do something. Like we actually want them to fully take that day off. I think all the research shows, and it's good for just the mental, and physical aspect of like take a day where you don't actually go out and physically do something with your sport. And maybe that's the day you catch up on your studies or go do something else or whatever. But I think it's just good for the balance in their life. During the season, we lift right now once a week. To be honest, we've been kind of potentially maybe increase that to twice a week during the season. They're not usually crazy lifts where we're trying to break their bodies down. They're usually trying to maintain whatever strength they build up over the spring or the summer. And then we typically, it's probably a little bit more in depth than this. We'll train a little bit harder kind of during the beginning of the weeks, and then it becomes more of like game prep so that it's a little bit less physically demanding, but maybe a little bit more tactical and functional as we get closer to the games and in the fall. In the spring, it's we have a chunk, it's usually about 4 to 5 weeks, so we call like our 8 hour period where the NCAA only allows us to spend 8 hours a week with them. So there's 4 hours with a ball, 4 hours in the with a strength and conditioning coach. And how we navigate that, we either do 3 1 hour and 20 practices a week or 4 1 hour practices a week. We kind of go back and forth between that. And then typically they're in the weight room then for three times with our strength coach. And then we also offer open times to our players. Now that's not something that we can mandate or anything like that. Sometimes we'll even build a practice. So, we'll do a lot of different things. If we have those hour-long practices where we'll kind of train them and coach them and teach them, and then we'll start like the scrimmage, and then we just leave and we tell them like, hey, you can stay for as long as you want. If you want to keep training, if you don't want to keep training, you can leave at that point, but the coaches have to leave. And sometimes that allows you to even somewhat extend the practices out, without the coaches there because they all obviously all just enjoy playing. So,
Mhm.
but then after the 4 weeks, you get back into 20 hours. And then honestly, I think the spring becomes even more physically demanding than the fall because you play less time or you play less games. So we are training harder and lifting more frequently, usually 2 to 3 times a week. And, we're really pushing them physically in the spring to really develop their game and hopefully get bigger, faster, stronger, more tactically efficient. And that's the time I think we can really improve them. And, we really try to stretch them to their limits at that point.
Mhm. Mhm. The delicate dance too, as you kind of in the spring, and then as once you're back for training camp and kind of the limitations as far as hours go. So appreciate the insights there, Nate. Chad, we'll come back over to you. This touches back on recruiting a little bit, but the question is, with as competitive as it's gotten in soccer, what do you believe separates a great soccer player from all the rest? And in the same vein, what is it that you're looking for on the recruiting trail?
Yeah, I think it's a great a great question because I think you're always sort of searching for that. And it's, I think when we're looking at recruits, I think I go back to there's some things about Bobby there. That first thing we always looked for was, what kind of decisions do they make on the ball? Do they have a general understanding of the game? And I think you get that most quickly when you're recruiting, when you see what they do on the ball. If they're making decisions that sort of make sense in given that moment of the game, then it usually means they're thinking the game okay. And so they'll understand roles and responsibilities without the ball. So I think that's the first thing we look for is like what, are they making good decisions on the ball? And then, okay, if they make a good decision, but they can't execute it, then you're like, okay, they need some technical work. But if they see a pass, can play a pass, and they're consistently doing it, I think that's a great starting point. And then you start to look at athletic profiles based on positions, whether you're an outside back or a winger, or you pace quickly, quick, center midfielder, do you have a good engine, striker, are you powerful, can stretch the game, good pace, center back, are you good and tall in the air? Doesn't mean you always play those positions when you're being recruited, but maybe in the back of our mind, we start to build our team. And so we start to fill in those different roles based on your kind of physical um, qualities. And then I think, it is interesting because I think you always do think about what makes great players great. And I think, I think a lot about Notre Dame's environment because that's where I've spent most of my life, even though I've been in different places. But I think for me, there's a couple of things, and I think our sports psychologist put me onto this the first time. Is that sort of like one thing is that self-directed learning. Like, do you have the ability to train or have a game, give yourself proper feedback, become that sort of coach in your head, and then apply it to the next day? Okay, you have another day, but how often, kind of with that feedback loop, are you controlling it in a non-emotional way and learning a little bit every day about it? And then, yeah, obviously the coaching becomes important, but if you're relying on just your coach to give you the information to grow, well, and you get very annoyed with us if we were talking to you 23 out of the 24 hours a day. So, but it has to be that little bit of self-directed learning. And then I think it's just, kind of a high performance lifestyle, which is a fancy way of saying, do you have really good high level habits, right? Um, are you kind of dictating to your day? Are you getting the right amount of sleep? Do you have a plan for your homework, your food, whether it's a nap, but just in general, are you living habits every day that sort of lend itself to a high performance lifestyle? So if you have that sort of self-directed learning, that discipline to live a consistent and high performance lifestyle, I've seen over a 4 year and obviously longer outside of Notre Dame, those are the guys that end up being very successful. And then I think they have this sort of inner belief that they can do it, um, irregardless of anything anybody else is saying. I think coaches sometimes can take belief away. You try to never do that, but I can stoke the fire of belief a little bit. But I think the ones that I've seen really be successful, again, have that self-directed learning, great habits, and then they just have that quiet belief that they're just going to keep going and they know they're going to push until their sort of breakthrough moments come.
Awesome. Awesome. You mentioned Bobby a couple times. We're certainly gonna touch on that here shortly.
Yeah.
But I mentioned at the onset of the call, your guys' background relationship playing together here. Nate, we'll start with you, but how does that close relationship between the two of you, how does that kind of impact the dynamic? And, do you guys leaning on each other, seeking advice? What does that look like when you're in season? How does that help you guys?
I mean, for me, it's fantastic. Like I don't know if Chad would agree with this, but I probably lean on Chad more than he leans on me, which I really appreciate that from him. Like I even like this morning, I'm processing some things from our game and I call him, and talk through it. And I mean, I think for Chad, like, he's been someone, when I was a freshman, he was a senior, a captain on the team, and he's been able to make a big impact on my life, and he's been able to continue to do that. But to have that type of relationship with, the men's coach at the school you're working at, and honestly, just having the close relationship between the two programs, I think has been really, really beneficial. And and I love that the both teams support each other so well, and it seems like they create really, really strong friendships just in terms of that. And that's something I think is actually somewhat unique that we have between our two programs that I think all of our players really benefit from.
Yeah, I think I'm the same. I think, it is coaching's a lonely profession at times, and I think to have someone that, a great friend and teammate that you can talk to through, whether it's just random sort of management or coaching things or training sessions, or just like, oh, our program's going through this a little bit, there's a good chance that Nate has gone through it as a coach as well. And so it's invaluable. And then I think the outside of just us, it does seem like it lends itself to, some of my favorite moments are in our games when I look over and I see the whole women's soccer team on the field cheering our guys on. And then if I go to one of their games, I see all my guys out of their locker room, cheering on the women's team. And even now, or, when we were training in the indoor, one of us is usually in the early time slot and one's in the later time slot. So it's always fun to go watch his training sessions and then just to see our teams interact. So I think it's really unique that we really do have one big soccer program and soccer family that is so cohesive, and I think it's such a strength for Notre Dame and for our programs for sure. But yeah, I'm incredibly thankful to have such a close relationship with Nate, and then I think it's really cool for our programs. It's an extra layer to the experience that not a lot of places get.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely unique to Notre Dame and just a cool story for both programs and your guys' relationship. You mentioned Bobby Clark, the great Bobby Clark. He's overdue for a visit back to campus, but what's he up to these days?
Yeah, I talked to him last week, I think, because I was trying to, Nate and I are kind of going through it together, but it was interesting to explain to him all the craziness in college sports. And I was like, well, what would you do? And so I don't think he had a good answer, but we caught up for like an hour. But I think, when you talk to him, it's just all about the principles that he bestowed up to Nate and I. And I think for Nate and I, it's just the to realize how unique our experience was at Notre Dame, largely due to Bobby and the way he approached running a high level, highly competitive team is just different than almost anyone else I've ever talked to or known. So it's always good to get his thoughts on the new evolutions. But yeah, he's back in Scotland doing well, playing golf every day. Looks good. He's got the same email, so feel free to drop him an email at his Notre Dame email. And with the McFarland family's help, we're redoing the stadium, so we've told him it'd be a good time to get over here and see the new locker room, the new lounge, and those things. So hopefully we'll get him over here in the next few months or year.
Awesome. Awesome. I'll say I love that when this question comes through, and then we'll leave a few minutes just to open it up. But Nate, we'll start with you. I want you guys to both comment on this. The question is, what are the best ways that your alumni and friends of the program can help you?
Hmm. I think right now, I think we're still trying to understand some of the directions from Rally, which is our collective. I think, with stuff being up in the air with like, up in I think it's April 7th or April 8th when this judge will make a decision if all this stuff goes through. I think right now it's Rockne. I think supporting Rockne financially is probably the main thing of, that helps us with so many different things, whether it's facility upgrades, providing, even just like meals to our players, post game, things of that sort, allowing us to travel in certain ways. Like, we sometimes use it if we need to take a charter because we're missing too many classes like that. A lot of times we'll pull from Rockne for that. So there's just so many different ways we can really utilize that. And then I think the other way is just like, if I mean, and I hope people know we genuinely do appreciate that. If you're ever in town, like, feel free. Like, if we're playing a game, like, please come out and support us. Come out to a training session. Our players love to see even, alums that, just want to come back. And I think it shows them how big our family really is and how, we talk about 4 for 40 or 4 for forever. Like, it's great for our current players to see these alums that, are living these incredible lives, but also still want to be, see what the program's doing. And if we're in your town playing, we'd love to see you, out of the game. I think those are the best ways right now that, that we can use your support.
Yeah, and I think, Nate nailed on it. And I just think continue to focus on just like being engaged. I think that's the part I think is so fortunate about, obviously being a Notre Dame grad and loving this place and loving this program. I think that is our strength. And then, yeah, we don't know how we'll have to rely on it at different times, but I think just in that idea, and I think Pete's exactly right, that 4 for forever, which we did change from 40 because I always thought I was like, well, if you graduate at 22, then at 62, Notre Dame just sort of checks out, then that wouldn't be good for a lot of us. But I think just being engaged and those relationships, like Nate said, are, you think you might be bothering us by saying, "Hey, I'm in town. Can I come over to practice?" And you're like, "No, those are great." And then my team can come introduce themselves to you, and just those relationships. I think that's the one of the biggest challenges at Notre Dame because we're such a national and international school is like, how do we make sure that we, create all these sort of natural interactions? And a lot of it will be emails and different things. But when you're back in town, how do we continue to engage our team with you? Because then you don't know what'll come from it. Maybe it's a job, maybe it's a friendship, maybe it's nothing. But just continue to be engaged and in our program when we do things like this, just let us know what's the best time for everybody to hop on because we want to engage with you, and because I think so much of our strength is the soccer family and community of former players, and I know we're going to rely on it in different ways at different times, but we need a good engaged group to really showcase that strength.
I love that. And when you say engagement, obviously music to the ears of the Monogram Club, right? We want to keep you all connected to your respective programs and appreciate the Rockne plug. We have members of the Rockne Athletics Fund team on the call who are meeting with our respective staffs and understanding where their priorities are and how can we kind of help push that message and move that needle in the right direction. And I know we're looking at schedules for the fall, but there's going to be a few that sync up where men's, women's soccer are home while football is playing at home. So hopefully some of you can kind of make a 2-for-1 out of some of those trips and stay on the lookout for you mentioned the 4 for Forever, and we want to continue to lean into that and connect the current with the former, especially when you're back on campus. Everything that Chad just said there. We have 5 minutes to go, and we can certainly break early, but I wanted to just give a few minutes if anybody wanted to unmute and direct a question at either Chad or Nate or both.
Hey, Matt, this is Stuart McDonald. I appreciate you guys putting this on. Just a real quick, maybe adding on to what the guys just said about support. So over the weekend, Mitch and I, my son, went down to watch Lou City and Loudon play. So, Aiden McFadden at Lou City and Tommy McCabe at Loudon. And it was great. We grabbed dinner afterwards and, caught up with the guys. So I just encourage everybody to support all those men and women that are playing professionally. When they come through your town, they love it. I mean, go down to the field after the game, flag them over. They'd love to meet you. We saw some of the parents of some other alumni, Dave and Monica Hubbard, whose son Chris was a goalie. So they were there as well that weekend or on Saturday. So just, I think there's support of the, current teams, but there's a great opportunity to support those playing professionally.
Yeah. Thanks, Stuart.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Stu. Anybody else? We have a couple more minutes. I think you guys were just that thorough. So, but no, that's awesome. That hour went like that. So, really fun to do these, guys. And thanks for everybody for jumping on. Chad and Nate, thanks for your time. Thanks for your leadership and everything you do for Notre Dame and Notre Dame soccer. You two in particular make it easy to root for your programs because of who you are as individuals and as coaches and everything you're doing for your student athletes. So, more to come from our end, from men's and women's soccer. And please let us know as a Monogram Club what we can do to help you and help you stay engaged and any questions you ever have. And we'll look to do another one of these. I think we said 1 or 2 a year just to kind of give you an update and a peek behind the curtain. So, Chad and Nate, thanks again. Hope you all have a great week.
Thank
And
you.
as always, go Irish.
Go Irish.
Thanks, guys. Go Irish.